may be seated. Please be seated. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. We on the record? Yes, sir. All right. Let's bring Mr. Bumpass out, if you don't mind. I'm going to have him seated at council table throughout the sentence.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Go ahead. Yeah. Wait. All right, we're back on the record. State of Ohio versus Jacob Bumpass. Let the record reflect Mr. Bumpass is present, represented by Mr. Serkin. The state's present, represented by Mr. Zipper, Mr. Tharp. We're here for sentencing. Mr. Bumpass was found guilty by jury on or about July 24th of this year. Continued the matter over, set it for sentencing. Court wanted a pre-sentence investigative report along with victim impact according to Marcy's law. I am in receipt of that. Before we begin, the court wanted to indicate that I've reviewed the pre-sentence investigative report. I've reviewed letters, victim impact statements that have been sent to the court. I've reviewed those and certainly will consider those when I impose sentence. But I wanted to let those who wrote letters know that the court's already reviewed those prior to the hearing this morning. Mr. Serkin, have you had an opportunity to review the pre-sentence investigative report?
Yes, I have, Your Honor.
All right. Any errors or admissions I need to be made aware of in the report?
No, Your Honor. The only thing that I would like to request is that the court merge the two counts for purposes of sentencing.
Certainly. You want to be heard in regards to the merger argument prior to mitigation? You may. Any specific argument you want to make?
Not particularly.
Just for the record.
It's all arose out of the same common situation.
Okay. For the record reflect that Mr. Serkin's arguing merger of counts 1 and 2. Does the state want to be heard on that?
Briefly, Your Honor, just as it relates to merger, the first defendant bears the burden of establishing that the offendants should be merged as allied offenses under the Ohio Supreme Court's decision in Ruff. The test for that, for merger, is determining the answers to the questions: were the offenses dissimilar in import or significance, were they committed separately, or were they committed with separate animus or motivation? And specifically, there's two cases I'd point out to the court, each from the 2nd District, with similar facts and circumstances. If you were to say that, if the court were to find that this was all part and parcel of the same act, State v. Rivera, which is it's cited as 2019 Ohio 3296, found that in tampering with evidence and gross abuse of a corpse, the victims of each offense are the same, those being the citizens of the state, but each offense results in separate and distinct harm. The harm resulting from tampering with evidence was the unavailability of the corpse's evidence, and the harm resulting from gross abuse of a corpse offense was the outrage to reasonable community sensibilities. State v. Revere, which is 2022 Ohio 551, again a 2nd District case, found the exact same thing as in Rivera. For those reasons, I don't believe this merged. Additionally, as it relates to the acts committed here, first, just the moving or altering of the corpse in any way is enough to satisfy that tampering. Ultimately, the discarding of Paige in the wood line at Mathis Road would be an additional act, so I don't believe that under that theory these charges would merge either.
Thank you. The court is familiar with that line of cases. The court doesn't believe that these two matters merge. Counts 1 and 2, I think, are separate criminal offenses with separate criminal animus, criminal thought, if you will, involved in each. Separate harms, certainly. The tampering itself basically is the removal of the body to Ohio. The abuse of the corpse is certainly the manner of disposal in the woods against public or sensibilities of the public. Certainly those are separate crimes. They do not, in the court's opinion, merge. So let the record reflect that the merger argument was made. The merger is overruled. The court finds these two, counts 1 and 2 do not merge for sentencing at this time. Now we've dealt with merger. Mr. Serkin, is there any specific mitigation that you'd like to offer at this time?
At this time, Your Honor, we do not. As the court is well aware, my motions for new trial and judgment for acquittal, this matter is going to be appealed. And we think it's in the best interest for me as well as my client that I respect his right to remain silent as provided by the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution, and we stand with that protection. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Serkin. Mr. Bumpass, I have to give you an opportunity to be heard. I understand that you have a right to remain silent and that the matter may be appealed, but I still have to give you that procedurally, give you that opportunity to be heard at this time if you would like. Is there anything that you would like me to consider in regards to mitigation and sentence today?
No, sir.
Mr. Zipper, Mr. Tharp, State, want to be heard in regards to sentence?
Your Honor, as it relates to the purposes and principles of sentencing and the seriousness and recidivism factors in Revised Code 292912, as to the seriousness of the offense, Your Honor, you presided over the entirety of this trial, so you're familiar with the facts of the case. But all that Donna, Brittany, and Paige's family wanted to know from the beginning of this is what happened to Paige. And unfortunately, we may never know, and that rests entirely within the hands of Jacob Bumpass. At the very least, Paige was found after nearly 10 years, from the time that she was seen with Mr. Bumpass to the time that he traveled with her from his home in Kentucky to Ohio and ultimately discarded her in those woods at Mathis Road. And 10 years from when Paige's family, friends, and members of the public were searching for her locally and across the country. And in all that time, he knew where Paige was. He didn't tell any of them. He didn't help any of them. He didn't provide any comfort or closure, only slamming the door in their face. Donna testified in this trial, and he stared at the ground through her testimony. He couldn't bring himself to look at her. As it relates to from September of 2010 through now, September of 2023, the defendant in this case has shown less remorse than any defendant that I've ever encountered. As it relates to the seriousness of tampering with evidence and abuse of a corpse, I believe these are the most serious forms of the offenses. And as it relates to recidivism, the defendant has previously been convicted of felonies in Kentucky. He was on parole at the time of the offense. In addition, he said his parole violated in 2 separate felonies, both as it relates to this case and then again, according to PSI, and again in 2012. So he's been on parole. He was on parole at the time of the offense. He has prior convictions, and he's violated that parole. So I believe that recidivism is certainly more likely despite any time frame that's passed from the acts committed here and the time of sentencing now. So for those reasons, this being the most serious form of offense and recidivism being more likely, the state is recommending the maximum amount of time allotted under these charges, which would be a total of 4 years. And Your Honor, additionally, I know some of Paige's family members would like to speak. If the court would like that at this time.
Certainly, the court will hear from them. This is their opportunity to do so. Good morning, Ms. Haywood. All right, good morning. And just for the record, would you give me your full name just for the record again?
Yes, Brittany Haywood.
Ms. Haywood, certainly I've read your letter that you sent to the court as a victim impact statement. I'm considering that. This is your opportunity to, in addition, anything you want me to consider, I will. If you would just address me as opposed to addressing the defendant directly, I'm happy to hear anything you'd like me to consider.
So I would like to start with a quote by Martin Luther King, and that is, "Justice denied anywhere diminishes justice everywhere." I have another quote that I like, and that is, "When we lose someone we love, we must learn not to live without them, but to live with the love they left behind." So I wrote this out. I'm going to read it and then, just kind of go on with it. So September 23rd of 2010, that date changed the trajectory of my life indefinitely. From this day forward, things would never be the same. Life and all it entailed would immediately become dark and full of pain and anxiety. When pondering on how I would even bring myself to write this statement, a lot of emotions began to surface. How does one truly elucidate the anguish and suffering behind an entire family for the past 13 years of their life? No amount of words spoken or tears cried could truly encompass the deep, raw, and real sadness behind this loss. Paige was a vibrant, free-spirited, beautiful 17-year-old girl. She loved life and all the people in it. She viewed life through a rose-colored lens and offered trust to people who did not deserve it, an ounce of it. Paige loved to sing loudly in the car with the windows down in the summer months and the same volume in the winter months too, but with the windows up. Music so loud you would be forced to dance. I believe she danced before she ever even walked and remained dancing every chance she got until the day she died. She got that honest from her dad, which leads me to my next mournful thought. Our father passed away back in 2017, with Paige still a missing and endangered teenager. She had been missing for 7 long years at this point, with no clues or solid leads or ideals as to where she may have been. Our dad died from a broken heart. Just a short time after his passing, our grandmother, his mother, also passed. And just like him, we know her death was the direct result of a broken heart. For nearly 10 years, I would wake at night feeling terrified by yet another lucid and disturbing dream. And I'm going to not read what I had initially wrote because it is just too graphic. But to sum it up, I would have these dreams all the time about my sister being torn apart by animals in the woods. And this is not something that you can get out of your head. It just plays and plays and plays and plays and plays. Many times I would wake just drenched in sweat to the point of becoming physically ill because the nightmares and the dreams were so real. And like I said, this is not something that can be controlled or changed or stopped. It just has become the normal pattern of sleep for years. Paige left behind a daughter who was 2 years old when this happened. She has little to no memories of her mom, and she has to live the rest of her life without knowing a mother's true unconditional love. She'll never have. And she's struggling right now as a result of that. My mother and her depression and the toll that it has taken on our entire family is immeasurable. This has kept my siblings within the confines of poverty and the anxiety having been passed down to my younger siblings who now struggle in a world that is hard to understand. My mother has become so paralyzed by the grief that there have been so many times, especially in the first 5 years, where she could not move from the bed for weeks, even months, unless forced by my grandmother to shower and eat. This takes a toll on a person and an entire family just having to witness this alone. All of the children as well, living in the home that, no fault of my mother's, just being so grief-stricken, these kids were not getting what they need. And now that is something that, childhood trauma stays with you. And my children living in the home, my siblings living in the home, witnessed her just inconsolable, just, there really is no word for it, just constant crying and just, I don't have words really. It is unexplainable and it is unimaginable unless you've dealt with it yourself. You could probably never really grasp the depth of it. As for my grandmother, who played a major role in mine and my sister's lives, this has affected her in ways that words can also not, I can't articulate it. seeing her child, my mother, go through this, and all of us, and then her being the backbone of our family. She would hang posters until her hands would bleed and then go to work all day long. And then get up and do it again, to the point where Covington police were telling her, like, you have to stop, this is private property or this and that. Her car was covered from top to bottom with Paige's poster. She was in Over the Rhine and ghettos with no fear, just hanging posters relentlessly. And as for the defendant, I continue to be astonished, angry, frustrated, and shocked at the 100% lack of remorse and accountability. For years, he and his family, I know they have TVs, and I know that they have seen us beg and plead and cry and grieve and just for something, for just tell us where she is. Never so much as, nothing ever. I can't even wrap my mind around it. It takes a sick individual to do what the defendant has done and to carry on with his life as if it never happened. And then today is just another slap in the face to not even say that he is sorry for our loss. I was expecting, considering this is somebody who is supposed to be a friend of my sister's, you're not even sorry for the loss of her? Well, of course you're not, because you're responsible. The lack of compassion is just, it's disgusting. It's vile. And the fact that he has escaped this accountability for all of these years. And I also just wanted to speak on, I know there was something at some point, there was a remark made about our TV appearances as if they were some sort of sport, and that couldn't be further from the truth. It was, and it still is, a painful encounter each and every time. It's not something that's enjoyable to get on there and be vulnerable, begging somebody to tell you where your loved one is. So I would like to end this with another quote. I wanted to, actually, one more thing before I do that. As far as forgiveness goes, I'm going to leave that to God. I find it hard to, and I'm a Christian, but I find it hard to even hold that space in my heart for any sort of forgiveness when there has been no acknowledgement, no remorse, ever. So, and I will talk with God about that on the day that I meet him. If I'm wrong for that, I'm sorry, but I just cannot even go there. And I will end with this. This is another quote from Martin Luther King Jr. It may be true that the law cannot change the heart, but it can restrain the heartless. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Haywood. Good morning, sir. Would you care to give me your full name?
Garrett Isaiah Johnson.
Ms. Johnson, what would you like me to consider, sir?
Well, first I want to say that my sister, she's my best friend in the whole world. She protected me and made me smile. And one day, that was just all gone. It was taken from me. So, to the man to let my family suffer and sit and wonder for 10 years where she was. I don't know what happened that night, but I do know my sister was taken from me, and my life was never, ever the same. Everything around me started to crumble and slip away. I found myself trying to make it all go away in any way that I could. I fell deep into a drug addiction that took years away from my children and my family. Just trying to make it stop. That Paige went missing. All the pain that it brought on my life at such a young age, it wasn't just that it hurt that she was gone. It was that my family fell apart. And my childhood slipped away so fast for me to grab a hold of it. I had to grow up fast, but I didn't know what growing up meant, so I ended up hurting myself and everybody that I loved. But still, even then, I wouldn't take any of it back. The way my life worked out gave me my relationship with Jesus Christ. And he saved me from all the pain in the world. Took it away like no drug ever could. Without what I went through, I would never have that relationship with Jesus. And for that today, I'm grateful. For a long time, I would sit and think about how much I hated the person that did this to her. I would think about awful things. If she was okay. If she was safe. Things in my head that would play out. Horrible things. But today, now at 24 years old, I was 10 or 11 when she went missing. Now I pray for the person that did this to her. And I do forgive them. And I pray that they would find Jesus. And that he would put conviction on their heart. And that they would do the right thing. I pray that I would see their face in heaven one day, because they can be forgiven of their sins too, if they put their faith on the Lord Jesus, even though they don't deserve it. He will save you. So I pray that you would turn to him and repent before it's too late. I hope that he finds it in his heart to man up and apologize to my family for letting us suffer for so very long, for letting it get so far, and for treating her like a piece of trash to be thrown away. I pray that the grip of the evil one and his demons would lose their hold on him, and that Jesus Christ would bring salvation to his life, so that they might be a vessel for the Lord. For I don't wish hell on my worst enemy, and I know in my heart that Paige would want me to forgive and do the right thing like a real man would do, like a grown man would do. So that is what I'm doing here. Today I forgive whoever did this to my sister, and I pray that they would humble themselves before the Lord and end this once and for all. And I also today have a Bible verse that I want to read to the court, and it's 1 Samuel chapter 2, verse 1 through 10. It says, "My heart rejoices in the Lord. The Lord has made me strong. Now I have an answer for my enemies. I rejoice because you rescued me. No one is holy like the Lord. There is no one besides you. There is no rock like our God. Stop acting so proud and haughty. Don't speak with such arrogance, for the Lord is a God who knows what you have done. He will judge your actions. The bow of the mighty is now broken, and those who stumble are now strong. Those who were fed are now starving, and those who were starving are now full. The childless woman now has 7 children, and the woman with many children wastes away. The Lord gives both death and life. He brings some down to the grave. but he raises others up. The Lord makes some poor and others rich. He brings some down and lifts others up. He lifts the poor from the dust and the needy from the garbage dump. He sets them among princes, placing them in seats of honor. For all the earth is the Lord's, and he has set the world in order. He will protect his faithful ones, but the wicked will disappear in darkness. No one will succeed by strength alone. Those who fight against the Lord will be shattered. He thunders against them from heaven. The Lord judges throughout the earth. He gives power to his king and increases the strength of his anointed one. Amen.
That's what I have for you today.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Johnson. I appreciate that. Good morning, Ms. Johnson.
Good morning, Your Honor. I just come to you today and asked to please give him the full sentence. What was taken away, my child, my baby, my daughter. There's so much grief and sorrow inside of me. And I don't think it'll ever be gone until I meet her again in heaven. And, he took that from us. I just wish he knew how much pain and suffering that he caused, and I wish that he would apologize. I want to forgive him because I know that's what God wants me to do. Paige is in heaven and she wants us to be forgiving. But I still hope that the 4 years is enforced upon him so that he can have time to think about his actions. Because Paige was found in 2020, it's now 2023. We still have not recovered her. That's 3 years. He's only facing 4 years, which is nothing. It's really not enough time for what he took away from so many people. And my granddaughter is suffering so much now that she's a teenager. I would like the defendant to know that Paige's little girl is living in hell. Me, I've been living in hell and I can handle that here on earth. I know someday I'll be in heaven with my daughter and this will all be gone and over with. Mackenzie wants to talk to Jacob. When I got to see her last, she just kept saying, "Can I talk to him? Can I talk to him?" I don't know. I told her maybe she could write him a letter. I don't know if he would read it. But she's a 15-year-old little girl who lives in a home with her stepmother adopted her, and she does not receive the love the other children in the home receive. She is mentally abused. She's not allowed to speak her mother's name. Her dad is not allowed to speak Paige's name. She lives with a woman who is jealous of a 17-year-old girl who was, I believe, to be murdered and left in the woods. She was left in those woods with no dignity. Like he took that from her. Like he just left her for animals to eat. And I just don't understand how he could have done that. But there's a little girl out there who looks just like her, who is suffering so much. I want him to know how bad Mackenzie suffers because she doesn't have her mother. I showed her a video of her mom holding her on her hip and playing with her, and then another video of Paige holding Mackenzie on her belly, laying down, and they were laughing and playing, and she was saying, "Who's your mommy?" and say, "Mommy." And when I showed Mackenzie this video, she cried so hard, and she said that Cassidy doesn't love me like that. And that's the woman that adopted her. Who, I mean, it's just so very sad that I lost my daughter, and this is happening to my grandchild because she has suffered so much. And this really messed her up. I prayed that, God can heal her, and I know He can. I just wish that Jacob could understand how many people this has hurt and how it's affected lives, and especially Mackenzie's, who is a child, and Paige wasn't much older. She had a birthday August 29th. She just turned 17. September 23rd, she was gone. She didn't even get to be a 17-year-old for a whole month. She had a whole life ahead of her. She had a daughter that needed her so much. That little girl needs her right now, and she's not here because somebody, I don't know what. I would ask you to think of Mackenzie today. Her life could have been so different with a mother, a real mother who loved her in her life. And I do pray for the defendant that he will change, God will change his heart and reveal to him, that I think maybe he just doesn't think about it because he knows how bad it is, or doesn't want to face it, but he has to face it eventually when he goes before God, so he should probably maybe want to talk to God about that before he gets there. And I just want to say that Paige's life is worth so much more than just the 4 years that he's facing. That's nothing, and I think he should just take it. And my opinion, if he fights it, that's longer. We can't get her remains. We can't have a celebration of life, a funeral, anything. Like, he's just holding us up on that. I don't understand why. I can't wrap my head around why you can't. 4 years is such a small amount of time. I just ask that he would just accept it and go do it and not fight this, so we can take Paige home and celebrate her life. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson.
Thank you, Judge.
Thank you. Is that it for the state?
It is.
And certainly the court will consider that along with the victim impact statements that I received from Ms. Haywood and Ms. Johnson. The court has, in anticipation of today's sentencing, reviewed and considered the purposes and principles of felony sentencing. I certainly presided over the trial, the entirety of the trial. I heard the evidence firsthand. I'm considering that as well as I sentence you, Mr. Bumpass. Identifying what I've reviewed, certainly the pre-sentence investigative report, victim impact statement, letters that have been received from family members. Looking at the purposes and principles of sentencing, first thing I have to look at is Mr. Bumpass's prior criminal contacts, if any, and he does have criminal contacts as an adult. Back in 2007, he was convicted of theft by unlawful taking in Kenton County, Kentucky. Ultimately, it appears that he was convicted of that offense in 2007. In December of 2007, there was a robbery offense, which was reduced down to a theft by unlawful taking, and he was sent to prison in Kentucky. So that's the first Department of Corrections number he has. So he served a prison term previously on that. And in 2008, November of 2008, another theft by unlawful taking charge where he was incarcerated in Kentucky prison on that as well. So the record reflects two separate prison numbers, two separate prison stints for Mr. Bumpass. So he's committed prior criminal acts and he served prior prison terms. The court has to look at the offenses to determine whether they are the seriousness level of them. Not obviously any felony is serious, but the legality of, there's a legal terminology, if you will, in regards to seriousness factors. Statutory language that the legislature gives us, there's certain factors the court has to look at to see if an offense is more or less serious than conduct normally constituting the offense, or offenses that typically occur. As far as serious factors under 29-29-12, after reviewing those, the court is going to find that the offense, certainly both offenses, in my opinion, are more serious than conduct normally constituting the offense. One of the factors is certainly relationship that you had with the victim here facilitated the offense. This is someone that you were friends with at the time of the commission of the offenses, that trusted you, and your relationship facilitated the offenses in the court's opinion. Other relevant factors as to whether the conduct is more serious, I would observe that, and I would agree with the state, that these are both the worst form of the offenses. And as far as tampering with evidence goes, I see a lot of tampering with evidence charges. Typically, that's somebody hiding, contraband or drugs or something like that on the floorboard, throwing it out the window. This is on the whole other scale. This is you secreting certainly a body as potential evidence against you. So this would be, on a scale of 1 to 10, this is the 10. This is the absolute worst form of a tampering with evidence charge that I have seen through my experience. As far as the abuse of a corpse, you don't see a lot of these type of cases, but they do exist where someone's taking pictures of dead bodies in the morgue or whatever it may be. This would be on the other end of that spectrum. Here, this is you disposing of Paige Johnson's body in a manner, I think it was described as disposing her like trash by the prosecutor. So that's exactly what we have here. So the abuse of a corpse, I think, this would be the worst form of that offense as well. And certainly your efforts to tamper with that body and that evidence precluded certainly law enforcement from determining any type of cause or manner of death. So I think it's the worst form of the offenses. As I see your prior criminal history, Mr. Bumpass, I see an escalation in criminal conduct. You go from theft-related offenses where you went to prison on this to these type of offenses, which in my estimation are much, much more serious. So there's an escalation of criminal conduct. Recidivism factors under 29-29-12D, that is his likelihood to reoffend. I would find that recidivism on whole is more likely. At the time that you committed the offense, you were under release from confinement. Specifically at the time of the instant offense, you were on post-release control and or parole through Kentucky authorities. So under their supervision, you committed these offenses, which makes recidivism more likely. You, as I alluded to, have a prior history of criminal convictions, and you've had other contacts with other courts that did not deter you from committing this offense. In other words, you've not been rehabilitated to a satisfactory degree prior to committing this offense, and you've not responded favorably to sanctions previously imposed for other criminal convictions. Last, but certainly not least, as far as the recidivism factors, the court finds that you show no genuine remorse for your conduct. The count 2 is a felony of the 5th degree. The court will certainly overcome presumption for community control or probation. This involves, again, I believe, the worst form of the offense. And you committed this offense while you were serving or under previously sanctioned from a prison term on parole. And you've committed that offense while under sanction from parole, and you've previously served a prison term, which allows the court to overcome a presumption for prison on a felony of the 5th degree. Certainly the pain, suffering to the victim's family is unmeasurable. For many years, you've avoided the consequences of your actions. We've heard that said today, and I think that is certainly true. The courts considered the purposes of principles of sentencing, including the minimum sanctions necessary to accomplish the purposes of sentencing without imposing an unnecessary burden on state and local government resources. Just so the record's clear, I'm finding that the offenses both are more serious than conduct normally constituting the offense, and recidivism is more likely. I'm finding that prison is consistent with the purposes and principles of sentencing, that community control is not, and you're not amenable to available community control sanctions. Ms. Haywood, when she began her statement this morning, and had a quote from Dr. King. It's actually, he's quoting I can't offhand tell you who it is, but it's an older quote from an old jurist, and it's an old proverb, if you will, or saying in the law that justice delayed is justice denied, and that is certainly the case here. Ms. Johnson's family's waited, I think, 13 years for you to be brought to in front of a jury of your peers. What struck me, I guess, listening to the evidence was the callousness that she showed and the indifference, lack of compassion. And the best, I think, example of that was the testimony of Ms. Johnson, where as the mother of a child who's been missing for less than 48 hours, you're the last person seen with her. She goes to your home to inquire, hey, you're her friend, have you seen my daughter? And you slam the door in her face. Doesn't get much more cold-blooded and callous than that, Mr. Bumpass. No empathy for what happened to Paige, no empathy for the family, no concerns for Paige's body or her remains. This is a friend, somebody that trusted you that evening. We've certainly escaped punishment for, I think, 13 years. But what's clear now is that everyone sees you, knows the truth, and knows what you did. I have to sentence Mr. Bumpass within the bounds of the law. The law here, there's a tampering with evidence charge, which carries a maximum 36 months in prison, and the abuse of court charge carries a maximum prison term of 12 months. So 4 years is the maximum that I am allowable or permitted under the law. These crimes don't, if these crimes don't warrant the maximum term, I'm not sure what does. 4 years maximum possible penalty certainly does not equate to the severity of your actions and the harm that you've caused to Ms. Johnson's family, to the community. But I don't make the law. I enforce the law. And I'm going to impose the maximum penalty that I can impose in this circumstance. In doing so, I'm going to find that prison is consistent with the purposes and principles of sentencing, that on count 1, you will be ordered to serve 36 months in the Department of Corrections. On count 2, you'll be ordered to serve 12 months in the Department of Corrections. You will serve those consecutively for an aggregate prison term of 48 months or 4 years. In order to impose a consecutive sentence, I have to make findings, which I'll do so at this time. Court finds that consecutive sentences are necessary to protect the public from future crime from you and to punish you. That consecutive sentences are not disproportionate to the seriousness of your conduct and to the danger that you pose to the public. Consecutive sentences are necessary to protect the public from you. You are highly likely to commit future crime given your history of criminal conduct, the lack of remorse, the danger you pose to the public, and certainly the manner, the callousness of the crime, I think. So certainly consecutive sentences are necessary to protect the public from future crime, which looks primarily at your prior criminal history. And I see an escalation of criminal conduct there. It's not disproportionate to the seriousness of your conduct and the danger you currently pose to the public. The court finds further that you committed one or more of these offenses while under post-release control for the felony offenses in Kentucky. You were on parole in Kentucky when you committed these offenses. In addition, at least two of the multiple offenses committed here as part of one or more courses of conduct and the harm caused by two or more of the multiple offenses so committed was so great or unusual that no single prison term for any of the offenses committed as part of the course of conduct would adequately reflect the seriousness of your conduct. These are separate individual criminal acts with different harms involved. To run these concurrent or together would demean the seriousness of the tampering with evidence charge and the separate abuse of corpse charge. And finally, you have a history of criminal conduct that demonstrates that consecutive sentences are necessary to protect the public from future crime by you. In imposing the consecutive sentence and the maximum sentence, the court has considered the aggregate term here of 48 months, which is certainly proportional to the crimes here, the harm caused, the necessity to protect the public. The case law the court's guided by, I have to look at the aggregate sentence, consider the number of sentences that I'm imposing consecutively. Consecutive sentences are necessary, again, to protect the public. Is dependent on your criminal history, which certainly demonstrates the need for you to be incapacitated for a lengthy term of incarceration. Each sentence on individual account should be imposed consecutively, and I have considered the aggregate term. I've made the necessity findings that I believe I need to make. I've considered the overall prison term when imposing that. Imposing consecutive sentences, I have considered each sentence on individual counts that I intend to impose consecutively on you and the aggregate term that will result. So I've considered the necessity, I've certainly considered proportionality, and the aggregate term that I'm imposing for 48 months. He gets credit for 48 days that he served. Mr. Zipper, my hope is that you discuss with Ms. Johnson, Ms. Haywood, why the court cannot impose the restitution amounts that were requested.
I have, Your Honor.
Okay, very good. And then for those reasons, that there's lack of verification, the court can't impose it. I will not be imposing the restitution that's being sought by them in the pre-sentence investigative report. Court costs will be imposed. Post-release control when you're released from prison, Mr. Bumpass, is optional up to 2 years. If you violate that post-release control, the parole authority could return you back to prison for up to 9 months for each violation, up to a maximum of half of your original sentence here. If you're convicted of a new felony while you're on post-release control, in addition to any prison term imposed for the new felony, you could receive an additional prison term of the greater of 1 year of the time you still have remaining on post-release control. You are now ordered to serve as part of this sentence any period of post-release control imposed by the parole board and any prison sentence imposed for a violation of that post-release control. Court cost will be imposed. You certainly have the right to appeal. You're well aware of that. The conviction and the sentence of the court, if you're unable to pay for the cost of appeal, you have the right to appeal without payment. If you're unable to obtain counsel for an appeal, counsel will be afforded without cost to you as well. If you're unable to pay for the cost of documents necessary for an appeal, they'll be provided without cost. And you have the right to have notice of appeal filed timely on your behalf. The final thing I would indicate certainly is that, let me ask, Mr. Zipper, on behalf of the state, anything I omitted or failed to advise Mr. Bumpass on?
I don't believe so, Judge.
You know, the courts, if I had a magic wand, certainly, you know, I see the pain throughout the trial of the Johnson's family. You know, certainly we're all human beings involved in the system. I'm sentencing you, Mr. Bumpass, based upon the law and what you did alone, without concern, if you will, in regards to that. The court has to approach that in a very methodical way in order, but certainly the court understands can't understand the pain, but I understand the circumstances here. And my hope is that the family of Ms. Johnson is able to find some peace now. Her remains have been recovered. Now Mr. Bumpass has been sentenced to the maximum, to the fullest extent of the law that I can impose. So my hope is that they find some peace going forward. With that, he is committed to the custody for imposition of his 4-year prison term. Anything in addition, there's court cost, obviously restitution for obvious reasons is indicated. I can't impose that. He gets credit for, I think, 48 days served. Anything that I missed?
I think you've covered everything, Judge.
Mr. Serkin, you're filing, I think you're filing maybe an appeal. Anything that you need to make on the record before he is committed to the custody of the sheriff?
No, Your Honor.
Okay, very good. All right. We'll stand adjourned. All rise.